Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Lolojo, for that wonderful presentation. At this point, we want to welcome our next panelist. That will be Professor Isa Babawe, Consultant Psychiatrist, Department of Behavioral Sciences, Faculty of Clinical Sciences, College of Health Sciences, University of Ilorin. Sir, your time begins, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, clearly. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to the National Association of Hospital and Administrative Pharmacists of Nigeria for inviting me to today's program. I'm also using this opportunity to welcome our header, Mazi Hoabunwa. I've heard about your name for a long time. I would say since we were children, if something like that can be used. Yes. I'm also very grateful to Dr. Lolu Ojo. It's interesting listening to you this morning. It's he's a knowledgeable person, and he has done a lot of justice to some of the things that we'll be presenting. But whatever we present together should complement each other, because this is a knowledge-based program. Please kindly share my file. Okay. Each year, a team is selected, and this year's team is what has been shown earlier. And the justification for that is that recently, the field of addressing the world drug problem has been plagued by misinformation of many kinds. So for this year, it is a better knowledge for better care, to emphasize the need to improve the understanding of the world drug problem, and now in turn, better knowledge will foster greater international cooperation for countering its impact on health, governance, and security. The objectives of my presentation this morning, since we are all knowledgeable people, is to, and we've had lots and lots, we attended seminars, we presented papers, we've listened to on radio and television, is to remind ourselves about some basics in substance use and substance use disorder. By way of definition, Dr. Lolu Ojo has actually given us some definition. In pharmacology, a drug is a chemical substance, typically of known structure, which when administered to a living organism, produces a biological effect. We know pharmaceutical drugs, which are also called medication or medicine. These are chemical substances used to treat, cure, prevent, or diagnose disease, or to promote well-being. Traditionally, drugs were obtained through extraction from medicinal plants, but we know that these days there are a lot of synthetic, drugs. Psychoactive substances, which is the substrate for this morning presentation, are substances that, when taken in or administered onto one system, affect mental processes such as cognition or the affect of the individual. This term and its equivalent, psychotropic drugs, are the most neutral and descriptive term for the whole class of substances, whether licit or illicit. And legally, drugs are classified into licit drugs, which are drugs or substances that are permitted by law, example, alcohol, tobacco, while illicit drugs or substances are substances that the law prohibit, such as cannabis, cocaine, heroin, etc. So the slide is now showing now classes of psychoactive drugs or substances. We have two types of classification here. The International Classification of Disease by ICD-10, 10th version classification, and the American DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th edition, which was released a few years ago, and we try to compare the two. Generally, it can be classified as CNS depressant, and under that, we have alcohol, cannabis, inhalants, opioids, sedative hypnotics, and antidepressant. And we know the way the thing are called in both system of classification. For example, in ICD-10, what is called cannabis in DSM-5 is known as cannabinoids in ICD-10. We have the CNS stimulants, tobacco, caffeine, and what DSM say stimulants. Of course, that include amphetamine, caffeine, cocaine. We have the hallucinogens, we have polysubstances, and we have other substances. That is generally how it is classified in both classifications. These are the range of addictive disorders. Most people are non-users globally. I don't use drugs. Most of us here don't use drugs. Then we have the low-risk user, the hazardous user, and then the ICD-10, we have something they call harmful substance use, which in DSM-4, that's the one before the DSM-5, classified as substance abuse, and we have in both ICD-10, DSM-4, and in the coming ICD-11, the draft, substance dependence. Both substance dependence and substance abuse in DSM-5 are classified together as substance use disorders. They don't bother segregating into dependence or harmful or substance abuse. These are the next slide give us the diagnostic categories or clinical conditions, that one can have as a result of taking some of these substances. Acute intoxication, harmful use, dependence syndrome, etc. as tabulated here, including dementia and other persistent cognitive disorders which can come. The diagnostic guidelines, like Dr. Lulu Ojo said earlier, history taking is very important. Identification of the psychoactive substances used may be made on the basis of self-report data. Objective analysis of specimens of urine, which is now available in most hospitals and centers and pharmaceutical premises. That's in urine. We also have the blood test, which can be taken, and the blood and then the sample and the type of substance the person is taking can be gotten from that, or other evidences such as presence of drug samples in the patient possession. Clinical signs, Dr. Lulu Ojo mentioned about drug paraphernalia, which are some of the things that we looked at in the hospital, or report from informed parties. It is always advisable to seek corroboration from more than one source of evidence relating to substance use. Objective analysis provides the most compelling evidence of present or recent use, although this does not tell us about past use of a drug, and it does not tell us about the current level of use. It can only tell us this drug is present, this drug is absent. Many drug users take more than one type of drug. These are polysubstance users. But the diagnosis of the disorder should be classified whenever possible according to the most important single substance that the person is, or class of substances that the person is taking. This may usually be done with regard to particular drug or type of drug causing the present disorder. Why do people take drug? The reason why people take drug, for all things that we may think about, are usually 2 or 3. To feel good. The person wants to feel good. The person wants to stop feeling sad. The person wants to feel better. He's already feeling good, but wants to feel better. And the third one is that the person wants to do better. This is where recreational use of drug comes in. What are the stages of drug use? We have the experimentation stage. This is when the person just try, to take, to have fun, or even to help the individual cope with a particular problem. This is stage of experimentation. It could be from peer. You two now try this thing, and as the person tries it, the person is actually experimenting. The person may not go beyond this place, but they go to stage 2, which is the regular use of the medicine. From experimentation stage, the person, experiences some feelings, and this may progress gradually into regular use of the drug. Then we have the risky use or the abuse of the drug, and later to a stage of no return, except by intervention, which is the drug addiction or the dependent stage of the drug. Etiology of drug abuse. Dr. Ojo has beautifully done justice to this, but may I also add to this. He mentioned biological factor. By biological factor, one of the things in biological factor is the genetic, and this has been proven beyond reasonable doubt that some people are genetically predisposed to substance use disorder, and it has been proven from twin studies and adoption studies. Twin studies in that twins that are monozygotic, if one of them has problem of drug abuse, the propensity, the probability that the other twin would also have is very high. And the reverse is the case for dizygotic twin, in which they are from the same, from different, zygotes. If one is, abusing substances, the propensity, the probability that the other one will use is lower than if it is for monozygotic. And we also have that in adoption studies. These are, epidemiological studies. The learning factor, which he mentioned, and on this learning factor, we have something called the brain reward system. When somebody, takes drugs, it causes release of chemicals in some part of the brain, and dopamine has been actually linked to this reward system in the mesolimbic cortex. It causes release of dopamine, which, gives sense of pleasure, sense of enjoyment, and the person goes on back to take the medicine. Of course, we should not forget about personality factor, and which Dr. Lulu Ojo also mentioned. People who are antisocial in personality are most likely going to use substances, and most likely committing crime, which is associated with that kind of thing. We have psychiatric disorders. The relationship between substance use disorder and psychiatric disorder is like a egg and a chicken. Which one comes first? To some people, it is the drug that leads to psychiatric disorders. To some people, it is psychiatric disorder that causes, the person to use drug. In order to self-medicate, it will start from there. For example, somebody with anxiety disorder may start taking benzodiazepine, either prescribed or as self-medication. From there, the person will get hooked on to the drug. So we should want to show that psychiatric disorders are very important in the etiologies of drug abuse. Then when we are talking about drug generally, we should not forget to talk about two models. We have the moral model and the disease model. These two models are very important in rehabilitation and treatment of our clients. The moral model in drug abuse posits that somebody who uses drugs is morally bankrupt. The person has committed a sin and the person should be punished. Whereas the disease model emphasizes that drug use disorder is a disease on its own. We've shown earlier that people are genetically predisposed. People have personality disorders, which is a disease anyway, that make them to use drug. So this disease model is what should be emphasized in most cases, because drug abuse is a disease on its own, and the person who is suffering from it would need treatment, physical or psychological treatment. There are some myths about drug abuse, and there are facts, about drug abuse. The first myth I'm going to talk about this morning. Why are we talking about this myth? Because this myth can counter effort towards solving drug problem in our society. Drug dependence is simply a failure of will or strength of character. I think this is what most religious people and moralists used to emphasize. The fact is that dependence is a brain disorder, And people with drug dependence have altered brain function, brain structure and function. It is true that dependence expressed in the form of compulsive behavior, but this behavior is strongly related to brain changes occurring over time with repeated use of drugs. In recent years, genetics was found to be associated with predisposition of individuals to be more or less susceptible to develop drug dependence. People who have drug dependence, that's the second myth, can easily move back, to occasional use. The fact is that this is not true. You may, once you are dependent, it may be very difficult to snip out of it unless you get some help. The third myth is that it is not worthwhile to invest in treatment for individuals who have drug dependence. It's a waste of public funds. Like I said earlier, the fact is that drug use disorders are health challenges, and government and individuals, communities, associations should continue to invest in treatment of these people. Another myth is that people in my country do not have drug-related problems. The fact is that there is no country, there is no territory, there is no village, there is no community that is free of drug use and drug use disorders. Another myth is that drug and alcohol-related problems only affect individuals in developed countries. That is not true. We can see that Nigeria and some other developing countries are suffering from drug use and drug use problems. There's already enough research for policy making on drug and alcohol-related problems, and there is no need for more. The fact is that we should continue to invest in drug research and many other health researches that will help in getting out of the conundrum that we find ourselves. Another myth is that substance users do not receive sufficient punishment. The fact is that people with health problems should receive and benefit from health services and not punishment. And on this note, I want to advise our law enforcement agencies to include the NDLEA to treat people not as people who use drugs, not just as criminals, but that people who need, to be helped and be taken, to hospitals, rehabilitation centers for treatment and not incarceration. The next myth is that all that is needed to cure dependence is treatment centers. Once you are in there, you are cured. The fact is that there is no magic solution in treating substance dependence. It's a long process with varying services, not always adequately available or provided. This is a chronic recurring illness needing repeated treatment until abstinence is achieved. Aftercare is essential to successful recovery, as well as compliance and responsibility of the patients themselves. What are the statistical figures, giving us? Dr. Oluojo has done beautiful justice to this, but again, mine will complement his own. It is known that adverse health consequences of drug use are more severe and widespread than previously thought. This is a global fact. It is more than we all thought it is. Globally, some 35 million people are estimated to suffer from drug use disorders, and they require treatment services. 35 million people. The higher estimate for 2017, I'm counting from UNODC figure, the higher estimate for 2017 are the result of improved knowledge of the extent of drug use from new surveys, particularly from India and Nigeria. And this is because both these countries, the two countries, are among the 10 most populous countries in the world. The number of opioid users was put at 53 million. This is up from 56% up by 56% from previous estimate that put it at, of course, at a lower value, and is much higher than it was previously reported. Globally, 11 million people injected drugs in 2017, of whom 1.5 million live with HIV and 5.6 million with hepatitis B, which are comorbidities. HIV is an infection, hepatitis B, C is an infectious process as well. We are continuing with the statistics. In 2017, an estimated 271 million people, or 5.5% of the global population, just as emphasized by Dr. Lulu Ojo, aged between age 15 and 64 had used drugs in the previous year. While this is similar to the 2016 estimate, a long-term view unveils that the number of people who use drugs was 30% higher than it was in 2009. So between 2009 and 2017, there had been a 30% higher increase in people who abuse this substance. Higher prevalence of the use of opioids in Africa, Asia have been documented, which is much higher than was reported in 2009. Estimated global illicit manufacture of cocaine reached all-time high at 1,976 tons in 2017, an increase of 25% of the previous year. At the same time, the global quantity of cocaine seized globally in 2017 rose by 13% to 1,275 tons. This is the largest quantity ever reported. North American synthetic opioid overdose crisis also reached new height in 2017. Next slide. The most widely used drug globally continues to be cannabis. And this is important because Nigeria is one of the greatest cultivators of cannabis globally, which shows that a lot of this substance, cannabinoid, is consumed in our country, Nigeria. Prevention and treatment continue to fall short in many parts of the world, with only 1 in 7 people with drug use disorder receiving treatment each year. The report shows that effective treatment interventions based on scientific evidence and in line with international human rights obligations are not as available or accessible as they need to be, and national government and the international community need to step up interventions in order to address this gap. The non-medical use of prescription drugs is becoming a major threat. This is important because as doctors, as pharmacists are the custodian of drugs. Then why are we having non-medical use of prescription drugs? Where from who is prescribing them? Who is dispensing them? And it's destroying our society. We need to, take care, and we need to be very careful, at this. Next slide. This is for our view, summary of what was and they presented earlier. We can see that 2017, cannabis 188 million, opioids 53 million, and within that opioid, we have the opiates, which are the naturally occurring, opioids, heroin, morphine, etc. Whereas the opioids generally include the synthetic opioids. Then amphetamine, you can see that 29 million, ecstasy, MDMA, 21 million, cocaine, 18 million. We are in trouble globally. Next slide. The statistics from...
Prof, please, you have 5 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. I will soon finish. In Nigeria, the National Drug Survey conducted in 2018, also cited by Dr. Ojo as open our eyes to a lot of things. The result of this survey came to provide the baseline information needed for the design and implementation of effective prevention treatment care services that are evidence-based. And as you can see on this slide, next slide please. But Nigeria's situation is not different, it's equally bad compared to the drug use. Drug use was most common among those who were between the age of 25 and 39. Overall, nearly 1/4 of adult population in Nigeria reported using alcoholic drinks in their lifetime. Next slide, please. We can see in this figure that 1 of 4 people who drug users is a woman. 1 of 5 high-risk drug users inject drugs That's about 80,000 users inject drug in Nigeria. Next slide. That's another figure, depicting the various problems of drug use in Nigeria. Next slide. It's another summary of what obtained. Okay. So problems with drugs. Next slide, please. Nearly 1/4 of high-risk drug users had been arrested for drug-related offense during the course of their drug use, while the majority had been arrested for possession of drug. Most have also been arrested because of theft or as sex workers, for burglary and shoplifting. 2/3 of people who use drugs reported having serious problems as a result of their drug use, such as missing school or work, or doing poorly at job and neglecting family or children. For the purpose of this survey, high-risk drug users was defined as those who had used opioids, crack, cocaine, or amphetamine in the past. Next slide, please. Need for treatment and top 4 barriers to treatment and support. As you can see in this is in percentages. About 37% of drug users, perceived the need, to be treated. 43% felt some need, while only 20% felt they do not need. And what are the barriers to treatment? Poverty, they cannot afford it. Stigma, they're afraid of being stigmatized, and then treatment centers may not be available in most centers, in most places. Next slide, please. I hope this slide will be shared, to participants later. How do we manage substance use disorder? Treatment available and where? In Nigeria, there is no specialized public hospitals for treatment of substance use disorder, despite the needs. What do I mean? No specific built hospital. Okay, this hospital, what we do there is to treat substance use disorder. It's available in some countries. However, treatment centers are available in neuropsychiatric hospitals like Yaba, where I know one of the speakers in this program came from, and organizing a training Colombo initiative. It's also available in teaching hospitals, Department of Mental Health, and some specialized private and faith-based centers. Poverty is a problem in the management of substance use disorder in Nigeria. No job, loss of job, neglected by family, friends, etc. Many still do not know treatment are available. Incarceration versus rehabilitation. What is the role of NDLEA? Like I said earlier, NDLEA should be involved not in incarceration, but they should liaise with hospitals in rehabilitation of victims. Next slide, please. Prevention. Prevention is divided into 3: primary prevention. This will include health promotion, health education, etc. Like this one that we are giving, this is education, and I know lots of education will be given to public today to commemorate today. Secondary prevention, that is prompt recognition of victims, of patients, of claims, and prompt treatment of such cases. That is secondary prevention. Treatment should be facility-based, and it should include all forms of treatment. Physical treatment, such as drug, psychological treatment, social treatment, etc. Then tertiary prevention. This is where rehabilitation, detoxification, etc. will come into, but not in incarceration centers. Next slide, please. We will not be doing justice to this presentation if we don't talk about demand reduction and supply reduction, often implemented together. Demand reduction refers to efforts aimed at reducing the public desire for drugs, such as education, fine, reprimand, reward, etc. While supply reduction generally involves attempt to disrupt the manufacturing and disrupting the supply chains for these drugs, both civilian law enforcement and sometimes military forces. This approach, sometimes characterized as the war on drug, has been the dominant approach to drug policy since 1960s. So we need to rejig it and introduce modern method, to this, including destruction of drug farm, crop swapping, that is, instead of planting cannabis, new crops should be introduced to farmers, restricting importation, increased tariff, restriction of sales, advertisement, and sponsorship. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, we want to commend NDLEA and Custom Service, our custom, people in doing this. We can see Caterpillar there, bulldozing cannabis farm, large hectares of land, being used, to plant cannabis. And that is a great effort by the NDLEA. We can see large seizures too of harvested leaves and products of cannabis. The one lower down there, you can see custom, that is tramadol, cartons. And then the last diagram there, we can see that alcohol is now more conveniently used. They are now coming in form of sachet. And because alcohol is a licit drug, it's a drug that the law permits. You can drink alcohol, nobody will arrest you for drinking alcohol. So our community has now been invaded by sachet of alcohol. Some of these sachets will contain as high as 45% alcohol. So small quantity, the person is high. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'm coming to an end. Policy implementation and the way forward. Implementation of policies and master plan. Nigerians, we've always had master plan and we've had policies, but we've not been following this. We've not been obeying our laws. And it is saddening that Nigerian government is not funding the war on drug as it should be. That is a great problem to us. Next slide. The stigma, concerning drug use should be, fought more assiduously if we want to, to really do well. NDLEA to implement intelligence-led policing model, targeting mild to high-level traffickers. In fact, this is where NDLEA should concentrate its effort on traffickers and sellers of drugs, rather than, putting effort building rehabilitation centers. I've checked the act that set up NDLEA. Their effort does not include, treatment of patients. Patients should be treated in facilities, not in NDLEA centers. They should rather target importation, of drug and sellers, of drug. Next slide, please. There should be sustained efforts, law enforcement and intelligence-led and target. Okay, I've mentioned this before. Next slide, please. Let's go on. Okay. This topic will not be complete if we don't talk about new psychoactive substances. This may not be a problem. In fact, it is a problem, not that it is not a problem. We now have a class of drug, new class of drug called NPS, new psychoactive substances. We've probably has also heard about novel, psychoactive substances or designer drugs. These, in most cases, are synthetic products. We have synthetic cannabinoids now, which are more potent than smoking a skunk, smoking cannabis, sativa, cannabis, stoking, all those weed. Synthetic cannabinoid, and we now have combinations of drug now that combine both, for example, cannabinoids plus benzodiazepine. We now have combination of benzodiazepines and opioids. We now have combination of various other drugs, which, when faking, produces very terrible, diseases.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm rounding up. Conclusion and recommendation. That is the last slide, please. Last slide. The problem of substance. Last slide, please. The problem of substance use and substance use disorder is real. It is a pandemic problem, and all countries, regions, and territories are affected, including Nigeria. Countries, territories, states, communities, associations, unions, like this association, this is a great effort that you are doing, and may God bless all of you in this regard. Individuals should work assiduously and collaboratively to increase the understanding of the knowledge about substance use disorders. Better knowledge of the etiology, epidemiology, the fact as well as complications that can arise for drug abuse is necessary, and it should be taken to the general public. Better knowledge leads to better understanding leads to better care. And if we properly take better care of our clients, of our patients, the world will be better for it. Thank you very much for inviting me to this presentation. I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you very much, Professor Issa Babawe, for this another wonderful presentation. Indeed, today's event has been truly mind-boggling. And from Dr. Lulu Ojo, we saw his recommendation that more students, market women, youths should have been invited. So that is noted, and we can only get better. And now, Prof, I've also recommended that rehabilitation focus rather than detention. So indeed, you can see that many useful recommendations are coming up with this wonderful initiative by the chairman for this team. So I want to also thank the over 130 participants that have been online with us.